Netflix kind of realized, along with everyone else, that you don't necessarily need the very expensive, big franchise setting film in a direct to consumer experience. What you really need are kind of these mid-tier 10 to $70 million films that people kind of come back to again and again and make sense for the audience that you're chasing.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Make That Make Sense, the game show breaking down the weekly stories shaping the business of media. Today, we're sitting down with Julia Alexander. Julia is the media correspondent at Puck News, an independent media outlet started in 2021. Before that, she was the director of editorial strategy and analytics at Disney. Other prior roles for her included the director of strategy at Parrot Analytics, and Julia started her career in content strategy at Fox Media. All right, let's get to it. Hey, Julia, thanks for coming on Make That Make Sense.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Honored to have you, and was just saying offline, congrats on the new role at Puck. Excited for the reporting you're going to do there and excited for your insights today. So let's get into the rules really quickly and then we'll get into the show. All right, so on Make That Make Sense, we go through one headline, one tweet, and one deal in 15 minutes. Each section, meaning the headline, deal, and tweet, will last 3.5 minutes. You'll then have 1 minute to answer each trivia question, and all topics are from the last couple of days. All right, should we get to our headline?
Let's do it.
So, off the back of a record-setting 2024 for Netflix, they have big things ahead for 2025, and one of those big things is their ad business. New projections have Netflix's ad business reaching $3.2 billion for 2025. And that would obviously change the dynamic between YouTube and Netflix if Netflix can beat them in revenue. First off, what are the keys, from your opinion, for Netflix to successfully grow their ad business? And then we'll go from there.
So Netflix's ad business is already on a very strong pathway. There's no doubt, I think, amongst any analysts that that Netflix's ad business is performing exactly where we thought they should be performing a year or 2 years ago. And so the estimates coming in from firms like Omdia, coming in from other firms, suggesting that their ad business will continue to grow, especially within the United States and EMEA, are really, really positive. What's really interesting about Netflix and YouTube in this dichotomy, though, that I think we need to pull back on is the way that they approach their business models is so completely different. So we love to compare YouTube and Netflix. We like to say that they are competing for the same attention and engagement, and that is true, especially as YouTube continues to make waves within the amount of streaming share that is allotted to them, or to YouTube within on TV sets. But what is particularly fascinating that we have to remember is that YouTube pays out a significant portion of its revenue that it comes into creators in order to incentivize them to continue creating content for YouTube. It is what has established their monopoly as a VOD player in that space. And so all the revenue that they generate, if you're taking a significant portion of that and saying this is now going to creators, then you're going to generate less revenue than when you look at a company like Netflix that has significant engagement and significant investment costs. But when they pull in that advertising revenue, they're seeing that revenue on top of their subscription business as that continues to grow as well. So it's really not apples to apples, even though sometimes it can feel that way.
That's a great point. And I think people, when they speak about apples to apples, they say, well, we're competing for the same audience. And now YouTube is on main television screen, so it kind of seems like there's that same dichotomy. If Netflix ends up beating YouTube in revenue this year, does that have any significance actually in terms of the overall industry, or is it just kind of a flashpoint in time for you?
For me, it's not necessarily one-to-one again, because the type of advertising that's happening is so different. We think about YouTube within this sphere of digital, which for a lot of us means programmatic. It means everything from small business and local when we think about kind of Meta and how they approach that space versus Google and YouTube. When you look at Netflix, and we can use Raw as an example, where they're selling out this kind of title level advertising, when they're looking to brands to come in on title sponsorships, the advertising deals themselves are slightly different. Now, does this mean that an increase in revenue from the advertising side for Netflix, especially as more people, you're looking at 50-60% of newcomers coming to the advertising tier across all these SVODs. Does that now give advertisers a feeling of confidence that they didn't have maybe 2 years ago? I think that's absolutely true.
Mm.
But even though they're competing for attention amongst the same audience, you could talk to YouTube executives, you could talk to Netflix executives. They would say that they exist within parallels of each other. And I think within advertising, that is more true than when you look at pure engagement.
Makes total sense. Well, I'm sure these two companies will keep you busy in your reporting for the rest of the year, so excited to hear your insights on that one. All right, should we head to our tweet?
Love it.
So 25.2 million viewers in the first 3 days. It's obviously nothing, but when a film costs $320 million in production costs, that's not exactly the return you want. And a lot of the sentiment coming out of this is that this might be one of the last times that Netflix invests in big star talent and big production for its films, and it might shift its film strategy. Do you think that the disappointment in the electric state and how it's done in viewership will serve as an inflection point? How do you view that?
So let's get the likely Netflix PR answers out of the way really quickly. They'll point to the fact that it's not necessarily what it does in its first weekend. They'll point to the fact that if you look at some of the top performing movies over the last several years that Netflix has produced, many of them, or many of those top movies, still appear within the most engaged with titles on Netflix. When you look at their engagement reports, they'll point to the fact that they're honing these relationships with people like Millie Bobby Brown, who's in Stranger Things, with people like the Russo brothers, who they want to work more closely with. So that's how Netflix will come out and say this is not a loss for us. What I think is really interesting about this movie, to what you were just saying, is this idea that Netflix kind of realized, along with everyone else, that you don't necessarily need the very expensive, big franchise setting film in a direct to consumer experience. What you really need are kind of these mid tier $10 to $70 million films that people kind of come back to again and again and make sense for the audience that you're chasing. It also gives you freedom to chase different audiences. So you can do more teen romances, you can do more comedies, you can do more documentary style films that work for different audiences at the right time and that they kind of keep coming back to. And so what I love about this tweet is not the fact that it calls the movie a dud. I think it really cements this idea that Netflix has experimented with film, right? It's only a 10-year business for them compared to kind of the television side, which is a little bit older. They've experimented with what works for their platform, and they now know that they don't necessarily need to spend that money. And if you look at additional third party research, there was a fascinating report from Hub that looked at the type of big IP franchise movies and TV shows that were drawing in new audiences, and that has actually declined. So people
Hmm.
are less likely to sign up for a service or to resubscribe to a service, which is another big point within streaming now that we're in this kind of more mature resubscription era. The idea that you don't need the $300 million movie to bring in 10 million people, which is what it used to be 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so I think Netflix, always ahead of the curve in this way, because they have this kind of first mover advantage and they have the data to support a lot of what they're doing, and they're hyper focused on D2C versus, say, a Disney or NBC Universal that is focused on theatrical as well. You're really seeing them say, we're glad we experimented with this, we learned a lot, but we have a new film chief, we have a new film strategy, and we're going to focus on the efficiency side of it.
Does this then spell the end for the kind of franchise movie model that we see? I mean, more traditional players like the Marvel 1, the Marvel 2. Is this kind of the end of that for Netflix? Do you think we'll kind of see more one off indie films as you alluded to? Or is that franchise model maybe not dead?
I don't think it's dead. I think they will reinvent, or I don't want to say reinvent, I think they will reapproach the way that they determine what franchises look like for them. When you are a Marvel or you're a Star Wars, you're a Fast and the Furious, you are whatever it might be, a Spider-Man, you can go to theaters, you know that the amount of money you're spending into this is likely going to return to you. You're going to make some form of profit on it. And we also know that movies that go to theaters typically do better on streaming. So it's kind of a win-win scenario most of the time for the companies like Sony and Disney and Universal. I think what you'll see with Netflix is them saying that we can create franchises for different audiences out of films that don't cost the same amount of money. So to All the Boys I Loved Before, thinking about spin-offs within that kind of realm, looking at opportunities to find new stars. But also the other thing that we see with Netflix's data all the time, if you look at their engagement reports that they do twice a year, if you look at their weekly top 10 reports, is that Netflix's licensing strategy is really working for them, right? The idea that they can have the audience come in for Despicable Me, they can have the audience come in for Fast and Furious, they can have this audience to come and sit with their films and be engaged with these films on their preferred service, which might be Netflix, is really a win for Netflix in and of itself. It doesn't need to be the ones that are putting out the films, that are owning those films. Now, would they like to in some capacity? Of course. But without that theatrical strategy attached to it, without the windowing strategy attached, which is how a lot of these studios made the vast majority of their revenue for the films once they were in theaters, right? Because you kind of maybe broke even with the exhibitor, a split payment. You maybe did a little bit of profit there, but then you license the film out to your pay one, pay two window partners. So if Netflix isn't going to do that, then trying to invest in these $300 million movies without that guaranteed revenue on the back end coming in months and months down the line, years down the line, really doesn't make sense.
Incredibly interesting. All right, should we get to our deal?
I love it.
So YouTube is the rage, from the platform itself to the creators on it. We saw that Beast Games ended up being a tremendous financial success for Amazon, as they raked in around $100 million for the first season, and now Mr. Beast is asking for $150 million for the next two. Everything seems rosy right now, and it seems so obvious that YouTube creators are the new Hollywood stars. Are there any risks long terms in terms of streaming services kind of making these YouTube stars the next Hollywood stars, or is it kind of all rosy in your estimation?
The question boils down to the incentive for the negotiator with the upper hand. And the negotiator with the upper hand is the YouTube creator. If you asked that question 10 years ago, most YouTube creators would love the idea to work with a traditional Hollywood studio or to work with a company like Netflix, because that level of revenue, that exposure to audiences was something that was really important. If you look at someone like Mr. Beast today, if you look at someone like David Dobrik, if you look at someone, along those lines, like Eliza Koshy, they make the vast majority of their revenue and their audience through YouTube. They are incentivized to continue building for YouTube. And then their next move is not even to think about, okay, well, how do we continue doing the same type of formatting work within a larger streaming player or within a larger movie experience? Now their thought process is, how do I go and make a ton of money in retail, in e-commerce, in branded products? How do I figure out ways to broach into related areas, like potentially like sports and ownership of a team or doing live events? So the actual move for them is not necessarily to go to an Amazon or go to a Netflix, go to whoever it might be and say, this is the final part of what I've been trying to get to. It's just another way to create revenue that they then put back into their YouTube channel. So that way they can form those parasocial relationships with their fans and then sell them, snackables or drinks at $15, $16, $17, $18 a pop. I don't necessarily think it's a bad move for Amazon or Netflix to look into these partnerships. I do think they need to understand that the audience is not necessarily going to carry over from YouTube to Amazon. If you look at some of those early numbers within Amazon, you're looking at maybe a 10th, 1/11th, 1/12th of Mr. Beast's audience coming in. You've got an audience who's not fans of Mr. Beast, who might be into the format, which is that kind of Squid game show style format, but they're not necessarily going to continue following that year after year. It's not exactly Survivor for them right now, and I don't think someone like Mr. Beast would be interested in becoming a host like a Survivor, like a Jeff Probst. But in the meantime, as they try to figure out how to kind of connect with younger audiences, doing these one-offs, there's these two-offs, and especially within the live event space or within the special event space, might be really interesting to a Netflix.
Okay, I'll put you on the spot here for a final question. Who would be a creator, it could be a YouTube creator, an actor of yours, that would be perfect for a new show based around themselves?
So I think the structure that would really work for a company like Netflix is if you look at what Pat McAfee has done with Disney and ESPN, and so he kind of simulcasts his YouTube show to an ESPN linear audience. And really, that is looking at a digital first creator working for an audience that you're filling time and space on, which is ESPN during the day. I actually think someone like a Logan Paul, who we
Hmm.
kind of think about as being an old school creator at this point, which is funny to say because he's still so young, but
Yeah.
he was really popular in the 2010s. But the thing about Logan Paul and about Pat McAfee is that Logan Paul's also in WWE. He has this connection with other YouTubers. Like Netflix is reportedly doing something with Sidemen, and KSI is a creator who Logan Paul has a long relationship with their business partners. Someone like Logan Paul, who also has a video podcast and Impulsive that's really popular, he can do a bunch of different things for Netflix and become part of the Netflix brand itself, which I think would have been dangerous 6, 7 years ago for all apparent reasons with Logan Paul. But at this point, as he becomes more of a business magnate, less so than a creator, he really understands how to make that branding work. And so if you're looking at creators and you want them to be worth the investment that you're putting into them beyond just one-off show, having a younger version of a Pat McAfee type that you can tie within Raw, within video podcasts, within a new show of some kind, within a after shows of some kind, or a host of some kind. I think at that point now you're really increasing the longevity of the brand of your streamer as opposed to just finding a show to compete with 10 million other shows.
Hmm. Makes total sense. All right, should we get to the trivia and have enough with the news?
Sure.
First trivia question, true or false? Paramount Plus became profitable for the first time in Q3 2023.
Q3 2023. I'm going to say false.
The answer would be false. It's actually Q2 of 2024. So good on that one. All right, guess that company. First, this company pioneered streaming media technology. It was founded in 1994 and it formed a strategic alliance with Microsoft in 1997.
Strategic alliance with Microsoft. I want to say it's Netflix because of the DVD business, but I don't remember if they formed the strategic alliance with Microsoft.
This is
Was
a real this
found
is a really old one, yeah.
really old one. I mean, I'm gonna say Netflix, but I feel like it's not them.
The answer would be Progressive Networks. All right, 1 out of 2 there. The second one was a lot harder. I only figured out that answer like an hour ago. So good for you giving that a try. But Julia, really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your insights, and excited to see your reporting at Puck over the next couple of years.
Thank you so much for having me.